Hello and welcome to India Reads. I'm Pradeep and we are reading The Accidental Prime Minister. Now, today we're going to be reading chapter 11, which is Ending Nuclear Apartheid, and this is a huge chapter. It's about 36, 37 pages, so I'll be reading a bit fast. I hope you can keep up with me. Chapter 11, Ending Nuclear Apartheid. In January 2004, it was Atal Bihari Vajpayee who had initiated a new round of dialogue with President Musharraf aimed at resolving the Kashmir dispute, but it fell to Dr. Singh to take that initiative forward. In the same month, Vajpayee also initiated a new strategic dialogue with the United States, dubbed the Next Steps in Strategic Partnership, aimed at ending what many in India believed was a nuclear apartheid that discriminated against India. That process too was destined to be taken forward by Dr. Singh. After the Pokhran nuclear test of 1974 and for refusing to sign the NPT, India had been subject to US restrictions on the export of dual use and high technology, that is, technology that could be used for both civilian and military and strategic purposes. India's grouse was that China managed to become a nuclear power under the terms of the NPT only because it tested before the treaty was signed, while India missed the bus by a few years. The NPT, thus, from the Indian perspective, divided the world into into nuclear haves and have-nots, and India, along with Israel, North Korea, Pakistan, was a have-not. The 1998 Shakti test at Pokhran invited a fresh round of sanctions. By 2004, India had managed to secure a witting down of the post 1998 sanctions, but the post 1974 restrictions were still in place. Removing those restrictions required amendments to US law. President George Bush was the first US president to recognize publicly, at least, that this was an unfair discrimination against India. He appreciated the fact that it was incongruous for the US to be doing more business in high technology areas with communist China than democratic India. China managed to avert restrictions because it was an NPT signatory. It, because it was an NPT signatory as a weapons power. As the world entered the 21st century, several factors discouraged the US to seek closer relations with India. First, India's own improved economic performance and the opening up of the economy to foreign capital and trade in 1990. Second, India's proven capability in the new information and technology economy as demonstrated in its ability to help the US manage the Y2K problem, also known as the Millennium Bug. Third, growing US concerns about the rise of China and Islamic radicalization, and the US view that India could be a partner in tackling these challenges because India too was concerned about these developments. Finally, the favorable impression made in the US by Indian American community, which had emerged as a prosperous, vocal and cooperative interest group capable of influencing US lawmakers. All this was reflected in the Condoleezza Rice influential essay on promoting the national interest, in which she urged the US to pay close attention to India's role in the regional balance in Asia, dehyphenating India from Pakistan, and instead thinking of India as an element in China's calculation. India suggested Condoleezza, who had already been an influential advisor to President Bush and was to later become his national security advisor and Secretary of State, is not yet a great power, but it has the potential to emerge as one. The US, she suggested, must help India to emerge. It was against this backdrop that the first Bush administration launched the NSSP to enable cooperation in civilian nuclear activities, civilian space programs, and high technology trade. When India had addressed US nuclear proliferation concerns, the US had addressed some of export control issues, easing trade in dual use technologies required by India's space program and civil nuclear program. But enough progress had not been made by the time the government changed in New Delhi. Dr. Singh decided to pursue this dialogue. In his very first address to the nation on 24 June 2004, he specifically said that he would welcome the expansion of cooperation between the two governments to include new and mutually beneficial areas, particularly high technology. High technology was the euphemism for nuclear technology, but it also referred to space, defense, and advanced computer technology. These words reflected a conversation that had been initiated by Mani Dixit over the NSSP with the Bush administration during the visit to New Delhi of Ken Juster, the US co-chair of the US India High Technology Cooperation Group, and Richard Armitage, then US Secretary of Defense. Dixit instructed S. Jaishankar, who took charge as the Joint Secretary dealing with the US, to end the impasse on the NSSP and bring the process to fruition. Jaishankar travelled to Washington DC, and between him and India's ambassador Ronan Singh, they were able to get an agreement on the NSSP by mid-September. This paved the way for official announcement of a Bush PM meeting later that month in New York on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly. The meeting in New York between Dr. Singh and President Bush went better off than expected. The two were able to have a one-on-one conversation with Mani Dixit discreetly holding Foreign Minister Natwar Singh back in the anteroom. At the time, I thought it was Mani's way of keeping Natwar out of that conversation for political, perhaps ideological reasonings, assuming Natwar would not be enthusiastic about improving relations with the US. Only later did I come to understand the intense nature of the turf war between the two and their battle to be the real architects of the UPA foreign policy. After Mani's death and before Narayanan became familiar with the US account, Natwar in fact played a constructive role, as it became clear by the time the PM went to Washington DC in July 2005. Bush was extremely deferential towards the older Singh, repeatedly calling him sir, and the two seemed relaxed in each other's company. On 29 September 2004, days after Dr. Singh's meeting with President Bush, the US government announced further movement of the NSSP. Dubbing this Phase 1 of NSSP, the 29 September announcement said that US and India would work towards closer cooperation in these areas in Phase 2 of the NSSP. The visit to India in December 2004 of the US Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld was the next milestone. It showed that a key Bush aide had joined the president in wanting to pursue close strategic relations with India, overruling the traditional Indian skeptics in the State Department. Close on the heels of Rumsfeld's visit, the tsunami that hit Indian coast on Christmas Eve offered an unexpected early opportunity for cooperation between the two navies. Mani Dixit's death in January 2005 briefly disrupted the process because Narayan was relatively new to the nitty-gritty issues relating to India's nuclear program. Among senior officials, the person best informed was Ronan Singh, at the time India's ambassador to the US. He had served as a secretary to the Atomic Energy Commission and was offered with the nuclear policy, but given the Indian bureaucracy functions in silos and given the PM's obsession about remaining in command, the ambassador in a distant capital was not easily drawn into the dialogue process. Moreover, there was considerable resistance to work with the US, leave alone trusting the US within India's diplomatic and scientific establishment dating back to the dark days of the Cold War. After a bout of cooperation in the aftermath of China's attack on India in 1962, Indo-US relations went through a turbulent, often contentious phase with events around the liberation and creation of Bangladesh marking the nadir. Nowhere in the Indian system was the hostility towards the US more palpable, and with good reason, than in its nuclear establishment. Not only had the US, through the NPT, helped legitimize China's status as a nuclear weapons power, but it also looked the other way when China actively collaborated with Pakistan to help the later emerge as a nuclear power. On the other hand, the US continued to impose draconian controls on high technology and defense equipment sales to India in the name of non-proliferation. More than one generation of Indian nuclear scientists had worked hard in the face of US sanctions to develop India's nuclear capability, and they deeply resented US official attitude towards India's nuclear aspirations. Even within the Indian Foreign Service, many egos had been bruised because of the rough manner in which the US diplomats would deal with what they often regarded as sanctimonious Indian diplomats. The turning point came in March 2005 when the newly appointed US Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice chose to make New Delhi her first port of call on a whistle-stop tour of Asia. Rice laid out a broad and new agenda of bilateral cooperation, including on defense and energy fronts. New Delhi woke up to the potential of a new phase in relations with the US, and in April 2005, Dr. Singh sent Natwar Singh and Montek to Washington DC. After an unexpected audience with President Bush in the White House, Natwar returned home with the message that Bush was extremely excited about the state of India-US relations. Condoleezza's outrage on the cooperation in the field of energy security became the talking point for Bush and Dr. Singh when they met again on the ramparts of the Kremlin on 9 May 2005, the 60th anniversary of the World War II's Victory Day. Dr. Singh and Mrs. Kaur were witnessing a parade when Bush walked up to them holding his wife Laura's hand. Laura, you must meet Indian Prime Minister, Bush said to his wife. You know, India is a democracy of over a billion people and with so many religions and languages, and the economy is on the rise, and this man is leading it. He then turned to Dr. Singh and said that he thought if India had to sustain its growth, it needed assured energy. He suggested they talk about it during Dr. Singh's visit to the US that summer and added, we can do great things together. Dr. Singh returned to Delhi convinced that the US was ready to take a big step forward to help India develop nuclear energy as part of the next steps. On 4 June, he went to Baba Atomic Research Center in Mumbai and delivered an important address on taking forward the dialogue on nuclear energy development. Praising India's nuclear scientists for their contribution, Dr. Singh said that their time has come for the country to benefit from an expansion of its nuclear program so that by the year 2020, India could generate 20,000 megawatts of nuclear power. Towards this end, he pointed out, India needed access to nuclear fuel and technology and an end to the sanctions that impeded trade in this field. Emphasizing India's record as a responsible nuclear power, Dr. Singh asked, while we are determined to utilize fully the advanced technologies in our possession, both civilian and strategic, we are also prepared for a constructive dialogue with the international community to remove hindrances to a free flow of nuclear materials, technology, and know how. This was a clear sign to the world, in particular the US, that India would like to do business. Dr. Singh's problem was to convince skeptics on his side. Apart from the residual anti-Americanism in the Indian policy establishment, many in the Congress party were not that keen on closer ties with an administration that was being viewed with great animosity in the Muslim world. Even though opinion polls showed that both US as a country and President Bush as a leader were very popular in India, neither enjoyed popularity within the Muslim minority. That other, even more pressing political problem was that the UPA government was still dependent for its survival on the left front, and the Indian left was very anti US. In short, the wider political context was not favorable to the pursuit of closer ties with the US. If India was unwilling to send a new warmth in the relationship, it was unlikely that a friendly administration would go out of its way to grant India the huge favor of ending its nuclear isolation. Robert Blackwell, the American ambassador in Delhi during Bush's first term, put it pithily in one of his famous roundtable dinners in Roosevelt House, the US ambassador's home in Delhi. India wants US support for Security Council membership, for its case on Kashmir, for its renegotiation, recognition of its nuclear power status, for modernizing its economy and its defense capability. So what will India give the US in return? Indian politicians and diplomats were not yet attuned to such a transactional relationship with the US, but they knew that the Bush administration would expect something, and they were not yet prepared to offer anything substantial. Aware of the wariness not just towards America but West as a whole, Dr. Singh decided to bring some intellectual heft to the discussion. He chose the subject of India's relations with the West as the broad theme for his special convocation address at the Oxford University in July 2005, days before his US visit. Speaking in Oxford's imposing 17th century convocation hall, Dr. Singh quoted Rabindranath Tagore in support of his worldview. Tagore had written in his Nobel Prize winning collection of poems Gitanjali, the West has opened its door. There are treasures for us to take. We will take and we will also give from the open shores of India's immense humanity. So saying, Dr. Singh added, to see the India-British relationship as one of give and take at a time when he did first so was an act of courage and statesmanship. It was, however, also an act of great foresight. As we look back and look ahead, it is clear that the Indo-British relationship is one of give and take. The challenge before us is to see how we can take this mutually beneficial relationship forward in the increasingly interdependent and globalized world that we live in. Many in the audience, including the Hindu's chief editor N. Ram, walked up to Dr. Singh and complimented him for his visionary speech. However, a misreading of his speech by the London-based Times of India reporter, who was not even present in Oxford, resulting in the front page story accusing Dr. Singh of genuflecting before the empire. Both BJP and the communists instantly attacked him. Since Ram had praised the PM, I urged him to write an editorial explaining what he thought the PM's speech, why the PM's speech was visionary, and he agreed to do so. However, the next day he called me to say that Irfan Habib, the Marxist historian, Prabhat Patnaik, the Marxist economist, had trained a strong attack on the PM, and it would be difficult for him to editorially defend him. Ram, like Irfan and Prabhat, was a member of the CPIM. For that matter, even Congress party spokesman told beat reporters that Dr. Singh should not have said what he did, even though the PM had quoted Mahatma Gandhi, Jawaharlal Nehru, and Rabindranath Tagore in support of his views. This setback did not deter Dr. Singh from persisting with his view that the time has come for India to renegotiate its relationship with the West. He continued to believe that the ending of what K. Subramaniam famously dubbed as the nuclear apartheid against India was an important step in the process. Ties with the US got a boost when India and US agreed to cooperate in the field of defense procurement and exercises that year. The initiatives taken during Condoleezza's visit to India in March that year was pursued by Defense Minister Pranab Mukherjee during his visit to Washington DC in June. He signed a defense framework agreement with the US, setting the stage for the PM's visit in July. However, on the nuclear deal, the Indian establishment remained deeply divided. There were two sources of dissent. The DAE was understandably suspicious of US intentions in befriending India after years of keeping India out of the nuclear club. Subramaniam dubbed US critics of the Indian nuclear program the Ayatollahs of nuclear non-proliferation. While Subramaniam himself had come around to accepting President Bush's sincerity in ending this regime and encouraged Dr. Singh to trust the US, the hawks in the DEA remained deeply suspicious, arguing that the US was seeking to trap India into a technological dependency aimed at ending India's strategic autonomy. On a flight to Washington DC in July 2005, DAE Secretary Anil Kakodkar gave me a lecture on US perfidy and declared emphatically, "I will never trust the Americans." With his anger and suspicion, while his anger and suspicion were understandable, Dr. Singh wanted to seize the opportunity being provided and end India's isolation so that India's nuclear energy program would develop without its strategic program being impacted. This was the deal on offer. A second source of dissent came from old Cold War ideologues who were unwilling to accept that in the post-Cold War world, US was looking for new partnerships and India would benefit from such partnership. They held the view that US would never allow India to emerge as an independent strategic power. Both strands of opinion within the government were used by the left front and the BJP to constantly attack the PM in public. When I told some journalists that the DAE scientists and some MEA diplomats were overstepping their brief and that in a democracy policy is made by political leadership and not by officials, I was criticized by some of them for what they put in complaints to the PM speaking out of turn. When negotiations between the officials of the DAE and the Ministry of External Affairs and the PMO on the India side and State Department and White House officials on the US side carried through this period, Dr. Singh and Bush had another round of conversation on the sideline of the G8+5 summit at Gleneagles in Scotland in early July. Even as back-channel talks continued and there was another round of conversation between Dr. Singh and Bush in the G8+5 summit in Scotland, there was no meeting of minds on the Indian side. Heated arguments between the MEA and DEA officials continued even on board the Prime Minister's special flight Air India 1 as we flew from Delhi to DC for the PM's US visit. During the stopover in Frankfurt, Dr. Singh, pondering over the challenges that lay ahead, appeared preoccupied. If he was unable to get his own people to agree on the common proposition, how could he negotiate with the US when the other side was rife with India baiters and non-proliferationists? However, when he landed in DC, he was extremely pleased to find Natwar Singh appearing optimistic and willing to help him strike a deal. After meeting with Condoleezza, Natwar went across to Blair House, the US President's guest house where Dr. Singh was staying, to brief the PM. He brought good news. The US was willing to address some of India's concerns. Most importantly, the President Bush had let it be known to his staff that he wanted Dr. Singh's visit to bear fruit. The Indian delegation discussed issues late into the night, but the differences with the US interlocutors remained. Early next morning, Condoleezza came over to meet the PM in an effort to break the impasse and went back to the White House to have breakfast with President Bush. Her efforts did not bear fruit and naysayers on both sides held up an argument. Even as President and the PM met in the Oval Room and had substantial conversation on a variety of issues, their officials had not come up with an agreed text. A press briefing had been arranged at noon to catch the Indian newspaper deadlines. Briefing the PM in an oval room before he came out to face the media, the only advice I could give him was that his body language should exude confidence and suggest that he had achieved what he had wanted. Keep smiling and look confident. That will do for now, I said. After that, the PM was to go to the State Department for lunch in his honor. With no agreement reached as yet, a blank press statement had to be issued. It was read by the media as a clear signal that the expected breakthrough had not happened. Just as we left White House for Foggy Bottom, the home of the State Department, Jaishankar came hurriedly to me and showed me a thumbs up and said it's done. The negotiations had gone down to the wire. Both leaders had virtually commanded their aides to iron out their differences and produce a mutually beneficial, acceptable joint statement before the day was out. The assertion of political leadership over bureaucratic and technocratic objections in both camps made all the difference. It was decided that the joint statement would be made public only after another round of talks between the officials after lunch. Till then, mom was the word. I was worried about newspaper deadlines in India. It was already approaching midnight back home, and newspapers would be soon put to bed. We had to get the deadline out in time for readers to see when they opened their newspapers next morning. I took the PM's permission to brief a couple of senior journalists, N. Ravi of the Hindu, C. Rajamohan of the Indian Express, who could be relied upon to keep their stories ready. Asked the editors in India to delay printing but not reveal the news till they got the green signal. This arrangement proved to be useful since by the time the joint statement was released, it was too late for most newspapers to carry it. News channels were able to report it in the early morning bulletins on 19 July. When the Hindu's conservative desk staff gave the story a bland headline that said Manmohan Singh expresses satisfaction over the talks, Ravi's informed report said it all. In a significant development after the meeting that Prime Minister Manmohan Singh had with American President George Bush at the White House, the United States acknowledged India as a nuclear weapons power, agreed to cooperate with it in the area of civilian nuclear energy. This formation part of the joint statement to be issued following the talks according to a highly placed official source. What exactly had Dr. Singh achieved? In the joint statement, the US had recognized that as a responsible state with advanced nuclear technology, a phrase devised to recognize India's nuclear capability without declaring it a nuclear weapons power. India should acquire the same benefits and advantages as other states. The US had agreed to help develop India's nuclear power industry and to this end would seek congressional approval of the required changes to US laws that would enable US companies to export nuclear fuel and technology to India. Apart from easing restrictions on the sale of fuel for Tarapur Atomic Power Station, the US also agreed to work with other countries to help India get access to uranium. This meant changing the existing restrictions imposed by the Nuclear Supplies Group (NSG). In return for this, India had to assume the same responsibilities and practices and acquire the same benefits and advantages as other leading nations with advanced nuclear technology such as the United States. An important Indian commitment was to separate civilian and military nuclear facilities and programs and place civilian facilities under the IAEA safeguards regime. India also renewed its commitment and made unilaterally by the Vajpayee government in May 1998 that it would not conduct any more nuclear tests. The subsidiary commitments included working towards a multilateral fissile materials cutoff treaty and refraining from transfer of enrichment and reprocessing technologies to countries that do not have them. India also agreed to sign up to the missile technology control regime and the NSG guidelines. All this was nothing more than an assurance that India would adhere to all its already existing stellar record as a non-proliferator of nuclear technology. The next critical step was for the US to secure congressional approval of changes to its law that would enable the US President to offer India access to high and dual use technologies. Once India signaled to what was called the 123 agreement, the US Congress would be able to change the relevant laws. The 18 July joint statement opened the doors for these negotiations. Dr. Singh had made history. In the midst of our euphoria, however, we little imagined that the process would finally end only 39 months later, after hundreds of heated hours of debate in Parliament, many days of excruciating negotiations around the world, and the reconstitution of the UPA alliance. The summit meeting at the White House was followed next day by the PM's address to the joint session of the US Congress. It was a written speech It was a speech written with care and deliberation by Montek and myself, with important inputs from Jaishankar. Dr. Singh rehearsed his delivery diligently. Since US audience like to applaud well-crafted sentences, the punchlines were underlined so that he knew what sentences to emphasize and when to pause in case there was applause. Dr. Singh entered the hall to a standing ovation, and he made his way down the aisle. And as he made his way down the aisle, he was repeatedly stopped for handshakes, the longest stop being with Senator Hillary Clinton. Usually, Dr. Singh was a weak orator. The only occasion on which he had made an effort to speak clearly and loudly, emphasizing key phrases, was when he delivered the Independence Day address. However, he knew that the US Congress speech was a historic foreign policy statement to an important audience. His listeners were the very congressmen and women who would have to give their vote of approval to the nuclear deal that he was seeking to strike with President Bush. The purpose of the speech was to win over their hearts and minds. He rose to the occasion. As Shankar and I sat with copies of the speech, pen in hand, to mark statements that were applauded, we found him being applauded for every minute of speaking time. The Prime Minister, we later noted, had been interrupted no less than 33 times. It was a 3,000 word speech. In his early days in office, Dr. Singh would read 100 words a minute. As he aged, his pace slowed down to 75 to 80 words a minute. At this rate, the address would have normally taken him a little over 30 minutes. It in fact took close to 45 minutes because of the frequent ovations, some brief, some up to 5 to 10 seconds, some long and some standing. Sure, there were many Indian skeptics in that audience, and some would actively try to block the nuclear deal. But that morning, the halls of the US Congress reverberated to unending applause for a man who spoke candidly and honestly and presented India in a new light to the new world. Partnerships can be of two kinds, he said as he ended his address. There are partnerships based on principle, and there are partnerships based on pragmatism. I believe we are at a juncture where we can embark on a partnership that can draw both on principle as well as pragmatism. With each round of applause, we could see Dr. Singh's confidence grow, his voice rise, and his articulation become clear. It was very moving to see and feel the palpable admiration for the shy, diminutive, turbaned man trying to alter the destiny of the world's biggest democracy. In another era, with another Prime Minister like Indira Gandhi or Rajiv Gandhi, the Congress Party would have had its members lining the streets of Delhi to welcome the PM back after such an historic visit. That was not to be. Not only did the left front and BJP manage to put the Congress on the defensive with their knee-jerk condemnation of the agreement, even before the PM explained its details to them, there were also internal worries that the PM's bonhomie with President Bush would alienate the party's Muslim vote base and encourage the traditionally anti-US left to destabilize the minority government. Within 10 days of returning home, Dr. Singh made a statement in Parliament allaying fears that there was a secret deal behind the public one and denying that India was entering into a military alliance with the US against China. He also assured the Parliament that the negotiations with the US to work out a separation plan and other details would not hurt India's strategic nuclear program. The media believed the PM, but the BJP and left refused to do so. The left's exposition was ideological given its traditional anti-US stance. The BJP was expedient given that it was the Vajpayee government that had initiated the dialogue with the US to get this very result. As negotiations progressed, Dr. Singh discovered that he had to handle far too many egos at home. The debate on the nuclear deal got enmeshed on one hand with domestic political battles both within the ruling Congress party and with opposition, and on the other with inter-ministerial turf battles, especially between the DAE and the Ministry of External Affairs. A considerable part of Dr. Singh's time was taken in explaining the deal to his party leadership and the opposition, and handling critics and opponents within the government, especially the DAE. The DAE had not only overcome its trust deficit with the US created by years of US sanction, but also its lack of trust in the PM. He was seen as a pacifist who was opposed to nuclear weaponization and therefore likely to sell India cheap. Some of Dr. Singh's critics spread the word that he had not only cut the DEA's budget as the finance minister but also opposed a plan to conduct nuclear tests in the winter of 1995. This was only half true. Narasimha Rao did consider the option of testing in 1995 but chose not to do so because the Ministry of Finance had estimated that the economy would not be able to bear the burden of the sanctions that the developed countries would impose on India. Later in 1998, the Vajpayee government too calculated the economical cost of testing and took several steps to neutralize the likely impact of the sanctions, which in the end turned out to be much less than feared. This was partly because in 1998 the economy was much stronger than it had been in 1995, but India's nuclear hawks preferred to see the issue as in simplistic terms. Dr. Singh realized that he had to build a wider constituency of support for his initiative within the government and would not allow the DAE to have a veto. Towards this end, he created the ECC in July 2005, including in it ministers from all energy related ministry, which brought in finance minister Chidambaram and power minister Sushil Kumar Shinde, politically influenced and supportive of the PM. The DAE was just one of the many departments dealing with energy policy represented here. The omnibus group was tasked to create a wider energy policy framework within which it was hoped negotiations with the US could be explained to the domestic political audience. It is a different matter that over time the DAE secured a veto over the deal mainly by using the political opposition to bolster its own position as reluctant party to the deal. After the ECC's meeting on 6 August 2005, a PMO press release read, the Prime Minister said that India must invest in nuclear technology and the recent steps that he has taken to end India's global isolation in this regard should help the country increase the share of nuclear energy in the overall energy mix of the economy. Dr. Anil Kakodkar, Secretary, Department of Atomic Energy, also emphasized the need for India to import uranium and invest in uranium mining to meet the requirements of India's nuclear power generation. He drew attention to the fact that the price of domestically mined uranium is 4 to 5 times than that of imported uranium. Several participants complimented the Prime Minister for successfully conducting a deal with the United States that would enable India to import uranium for nuclear power projects. The PMO spared no trouble to educate the public and political opinion on the agreement, and Dr. Singh spoke at length in both houses of parliament. Diplomats Jayant Prasad and S. Jaishankar, both of whom had intimate knowledge of the nuclear deal, helped me prepare a booklet, Facts About India's Initiative for Seeking International Cooperation in Civil Nuclear Energy, that was then translated into Indian languages and published by the Directorate of Advertising and Visual Publicity of the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting. While the essence of the deal was strategic gain for India in that India's isolation within the international nuclear regime would end, the gains were projected to the general public as an easing of domestic energy supply situation. Ordinary people from across the country would easily misunderstand that, deprived as they were of assured electricity. Between August 2005 and February 2006, the negotiations focused on separation plan. India had a total of 22 nuclear power plants in 2005. The US side suggested that India could classify 4 of them as required for its strategic program. The Indian side wanted 8 of the 22, including 2 research reactors, classified as part of its strategic program, with 14 separated out as civilian facilities that would be brought under the IAEA safeguards. For 7 months, the negotiations went on with no agreement. President Bush was scheduled to visit India on 2nd March, and even a fortnight ahead of his visit, there was no agreement on the separation plan. Without a separation plan, the Bush administration would not be able to go to the Congress to secure its approval of the deal. If the two sides were unable to arrive at an agreement, the Bush visit would be long on rhetoric and short on substance. On Wednesday, 22 February, Rama and I went to Andhra Bhavan for dinner. We were in mid thali when my mobile phone rang. It was 3 RCR number. It was the PM himself summoning me. I forced Rama to forego desert and we drove straight to the PM's house. While noting the urgency in the PM's voice, I thought I was being summoned for a discussion on his reply the next morning to the debate in the Lok Sabha on the motion of thanks for the president's address to the parliament. I had drafted his reply and felt he might want to go over some points I had made. At RCR, Rama chose to wait in the car park, assuming I would be back soon. When I reached 3 RCR, Dr. Singh was seated in his living room looking distraught. We do not have an agreement as yet, and President Bush is coming in a week's time. I don't think this nuclear agreement will go through, he said. I was not prepared for it. I had not been in the loop on ongoing negotiations and was unaware that they were on the verge of breaking down. The Indian side still wanted a 14-8 division between civilian and military reactors, while the American side had not budged from its position of 18-4. However, moreover, the Indian side was particularly keen on keeping the two research reactors out of the IAEA safeguards. The PM was clear in his mind that his government had made its best offer and would not back down. It was up to the American side to agree or close the negotiations and walk away. The later would be disastrous, giving the political capital sorry had the political capital that the PM had already expended on the matter. Clearly, he was worried. He also believed that the deadlock was only at the level of the negotiators, and if President Bush was made aware of this, he would get the American negotiators to back off and accept Indian terms. When I explained to President Bush that we would not be able to accept what we would be able to accept, he was okay with that, he said. He kept repeating to me that it was not his intention to hurt India's strategic capability. So I do not think that the US insistence on 18 has his approval. He needs to be made aware of the deadlock so that he can intervene with his people. I realized Dr. Singh was wondering if there was any way I could help. I imagine he must have reached out to other interlocutors as well. I knew my friend Ashley Tellis, who had access to people in the White House, was already in Delhi. Maybe he could convey a message to the White House. Offering to try, I went back to the car park and called Ashley. We agreed to meet at breakfast at his hotel the next morning. I first met Ashley as a member of the India-US Track 2 group sponsored by the Confederation of Indian Industry and the Aspen Strategy Group, a high-powered US think tank. An Indian American from Goa, Ashley had made his mark as a bright spark on the foreign policy and strategic affairs think tank circuit in US. After the Pokhran 2 nuclear test, he wrote an authoritative book on India's nuclear strategy. He came to be noticed in India's policy-making circles when US Ambassador Robert Blackwell inducted Ashley as his advisor in the US Embassy in Delhi. Ashley was a perfect interlocutor between India and the US. He understood both systems well and was committed to good relations between the two democracies. He had acquired impeccable professional credentials as an American analyst while developing friendships in India based on trust. I certainly knew I could trust him. Over breakfast, we discussed all the options and the offers that the two sides made to each other on the separation plan. I conveyed to Dr. Singh that a 14-8 separation plan was India's bottom line and that Dr. Singh felt President Bush would approve the Indian offer only if he were made aware of it. Singh said that this would be difficult to sell with the anti-deal non-proliferation lobby in the US Congress. He felt the second best deal possible would be one where India committed to 40 in the first round and agreed to go up to 18 in the by a specified date, like 2014 or 2016 to the latest. He was also not sure if the US side would agree to the Indian demand to keep the fast breeder research reactors outside the civilian category. Having offered his own views, Ashley agreed to convey Dr. Singh's message to his contacts in the White House. When I drove to 3 RCR and told the PM what had transpired with Ashley, he was disappointed. This will not work, he mumbled. It seemed as if he had not slept through the night. Later that morning, he drove to the Parliament to reply to the debate on the motion of thanks to the President's address. He spoke at length about almost every issue that was raised in the debate, but surprisingly made no reference at all to the state of negotiations on the Indo-US nuclear agreement or what he expected from Bush's visit a few days later. He ended his lengthy, mostly extempore statement by defending his vision of India's foreign policy and concluded, "Sir, this House has my solemn assurance that in pursuing our foreign policy, in ensuring our national security and promoting our economic development, our government will have the nation's interests uppermost in our mind. I do believe that we have the trust and confidence of the people of India. 4 days later, on 27th February, Dr. Singh made a lengthy suo motu statement in Parliament, virtually setting out India's terms for an agreement. The statement was aimed partly at reassuring domestic critics of the deal and partly at drawing public red lines on what was an offer to the US. His lengthy statement pressed on all the right buttons for various constituencies at home and abroad. On the key issue of separation plan, it said, our proposed separation plan entails identifying in phases a number of our thermal nuclear reactors as civilian facilities to be placed under the IAEA safeguards, amounting to roughly 65% of the total installed thermal nuclear power capacity by the end of the separation plan. A list of some other DAE facilities may be added to the list of facilities within the civilian domain. The separation plan will create a clearly defined civilian domain where IAEA safeguards apply. On our part, we are committed not to divert any nuclear material intended for civilian domain from designated civilian use or for export to third countries without safeguards. The percentage specified indicated that only 14 plants would be on offer for separation. The DAE obviously rejected Ashley's second opinion and forced the PM to state India's bottom line in Parliament, thus closing any window for negotiation. It was a take it or leave it stand. US negotiators were reportedly livid till the very last minute they did not relent. On the evening of 1 March, President Bush was received at the Parliament airport by Dr. Singh. As he got into his car, Bush turned to MK Narayan and placing his hands on Narayan's shoulders and making direct eye contact with him, said loud enough for the others around to hear, I want that deal. The negotiating terms on both sides got the message. President Bush was making it clear to everyone on his side and asked that whatever differences were still holding up an agreement should be resolved overnight, and by the next morning, when he sat down with Dr. Singh for the formal summit meeting, the agreement would be ready for the two leaders' signature. Indian and US negotiators burned the midnight oil, narrowing their differences so that they could report back to the leaders the very next morning that they now have a deal. At 8:30 a.m. on the morning of 2nd March, I arrived at the forecourt of Rashtrapati Bhavan for the ceremonial welcome of the President. Soldiers from the Army, Navy and Air Force were smartly lined up for the Guard of Honor. As senior ministers and officials arrived one by one and took their allotted seats, Ronan Singh walked up to me and indicated that most differences had been ironed out and things should fall in place in time for the two leaders to make an announcement. Referring to a conversation he had with Pranab Mukherjee, at the time Defence Minister, whose support for the nuclear deal was not fully assured till then, Ronan added, I spoke to RM, he is now supportive, he understands the importance of getting the deal and the dangers of it falling through. We have him on our side. Pranab's support for the deal was in some doubt, mainly because according to some political observers, it felt that he may want to remain in the good books of the CPIM given its dependence on the left to get re-elected in the Lok Sabha from West Bengal. Ronan's outreach to to Pranab and the reassuring speech was therefore helpful. I saw the PM's motorcade arrive in the forecourt and walked up to Dr. Singh. He looked preoccupied. After he finished greeting his ministerial colleagues, he turned to me saying so in a matter of fact way. That was always my cue to offer him the latest news or gossip. I briefed him on what Ronan had just mentioned to me. Can I trust him? He asked, referring to the defense minister. I said that there was no reason why Pranab would lie to Ronan. If he had assured Ronan of his cooperation, then we should trust him. But I added there was no harm in Dr. Singh having another word with Pranab before the formal meeting at Hyderabad House. President Abdul Kalam's motorcade arrived and soon we heard guns booming, announcing the entry of President Bush's cavalcade into Rashtrapati Bhavan forecourt. After the 21 gun salute, the Guard of Honor and other formalities, the two leaders of state went their separate ways. Dr. Singh walked up to Pranab and the two drove down together to South Block. At Hyderabad House, Dr. Singh and President Bush were closeted together for 30 minutes, with officials on both sides still discussing the fine print of the joint statement in another room. When the two delegates finally met, it was Condoleezza Rice who spoke first and informed of President Bush, "We have an agreement." All the tension in the air evaporated. President Bush was his warm and jovial self, and Dr. Singh couldn't stop smiling. The 2 March 2006 agreement accepted the Indian red lines as specified by the PM and conveyed to Ashley a week later. India was required to place under IEA safeguards only 14 power reactors with an installed thermal power capacity that would amount to 65% of the total capacity by 2014. The US side also agreed that India would not accept safeguards on the two fast breeder research reactors at Kalpakkam. Finally, it was agreed that Indian government would determine which of the 22 plants would be classified as civilian and which would be set aside for the strategic program. Bush and the PM had satisfied the DA. The Bush visit was a great success and a shot in the arm for Dr. Singh. Whatever his political image, at a personal level, Bush was warm and friendly. Being shy and poor conversationalist, Dr. Singh always relaxed in the company of men who were gregarious and took an instant liking to Bush. When the two first met in New York in September 2004, Bush was deferential and rather surprising for an American president, kept addressing Dr. Singh as Sir. By the time they met in Delhi in March 2006, the two had become buddies. Bush's gesture of placing his arm around Dr. Singh's shoulder as the two walked towards the media was frowned upon by some Indian diplomats and journalists who read it as a patronizing one. But to me, watching it from quarters, he seemed to be treating Dr. Singh like a buddy in a natural sort of the way. That they clearly had good personal chemistry, and that played a key role in bringing the nuclear deal to fruition. In the months that followed, Indian officials had to present their separation plan to the US to enable the US government to secure the congressional approval. Amendments to the US law, mainly the US Atomic Energy Act, were made through the Henry J. Hyde Act of December 2006. This enabled the US government to then conclude the 123 agreement with India that would enable the two countries to resume trade in nuclear trade and technology. All the processes were long drawn out and full of controversy. Naysayers on both sides tried their best at every stage to sabotage the deal. The legislative process in the US was not as contentious as it was in India. Many US lawmakers were not convinced by President Bush's arguments in favor of an India specific exemption and argued that this would encourage nuclear proliferation by other powers. In India, both BJP and the left parties ganged up against Dr. Singh. Many tried to fish in these troubled waters. Every now and then, someone or the other would come and tell me that a plot was set afoot to unseat Dr. Singh since his insistence on the deal had become an embarrassment for the Congress. Sometimes even senior cabinet ministers would walk into my room whispering conspiracy theories and advising me to carry them to the PM. What complicated the politics of the nuclear deal was the US insistence that India too demonstrated its willingness to address the US security concerns. This was, I'm sorry, yeah, this was the black quill question. What was India prepared to do for US in exchange for what India expected the US to do for it? Rahul Gandhi had captured the idea well when he paraphrased John Kennedy's famous line, "Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country," and said in the Lok Sabha during the debate on the vote of confidence sought by Dr. Singh in July 2008. What is important is that we stop worrying about how the world will impact us and we step out and worry about how we will impact the world. That was the question the US was posing at the time. How did India intend to impact the world around this? Would this accord well with the interests of the United States? It was clear that the test of true love would be India's position on Iran's nuclear program. Dr. Singh had already stated in interviews to the US media that India's stance was clear. Iran should adhere to its commitments as a signatory to the NPT. Since Iran was an NPT beneficiary as a non-weapons power, it should adhere to the terms of the NPT, which, among other things, required Iran to be transparent about its civilian nuclear program and committed to full adherence to IAEA inspections and protocols. This was not the anti-Iran position, it merely stated the obvious. However, US lawmakers and Dr. Singh finally gave US lawmakers and media sought even more explicit statements, and Dr. Singh finally gave one when he told the media in the US that India did not wish to see any more nuclear powers in its neighborhood, by asserting that it was in India's interest to see the new nuclear powers emerging in its neighborhood. Dr. Singh defined his government's stance on Iran's nuclear program in terms of India's national interests and not as a gesture to the US. It was a view that no Indian political party could have objected to. Yet there were critics in India, especially in the left. They interpreted the PM's categorical statement as no towing to the US. It was against this background that Dr. Singh was required to take a view on the resolution of the that resolution that Germany, France, and Britain EU3 put up for a vote at the IAEA. The resolution stated that Iran had breached the IAEA commitments and called on Iran to adhere to these, while stating that the matter be resolved at the IAEA itself. While supporting the resolution in principle, India disagreed with parts of the resolution to demonstrate its independent position. The politics of how this position was arrived at was important. Dr. Singh was in Chandigarh on 24 September when the EU3 resolution came up for voting. Natwar Singh called him late in the evening to seek his guidance on how India should vote. Natwar Singh was in New York in the UN. His own view was that India should be on the side of the majority. Dr. Singh agreed and suggested that he seek the views of Sonia Gandhi and the members of the CSS, which meant Pranab Chidambaram and Shivraj Patil. Once Natwar ensured that they were all on board, Dr. Singh asked him to convey the government's view on the Indian ambassador to the IAEA. 22 countries voted in support of the EU3 resolution, 12 abstained, and only Venezuela voted against it. India went along with the majority. The important thing was that CCS took an unanimous view on it. Yet stories were planted in the media that the decision on the Iran vote at the IAEA was that of Dr. Singh alone. This appealed to the left and suited its interpretation of what was happening. Months later, when the IAEA voted to take the matter into the UN Security Council, Russia and China, which had abstained in September, voted with the majority, vindicating India's stance. The policies of the Iran vote had less to do with India's foreign policy than with domestic concerns about the voting preferences of the India Shia community on the grounds that they felt an affiliation with the Shia majority Iran. Dr. Singh refused to accept the view that the Shia community would not sorry one more time sorry about this, I just slipped my page. Give me a minute and I should be there. Yeah. Yeah. The Dr. Singh refused to accept the view that the Shia community would not support an initiative that was in the interest of the country. They were Indians first and as patriotic as any other community, he pointed out to those who raised these issues. Dr. Singh held steadfastly to the view that refusing to do what he accused of Karat of doing, namely of communalizing India's foreign policy. Progress on the India-US negotiations was slow through 2006. On 17 August 2006, Dr. Singh put up one of his best performances in the parliament when at the end of a lengthy debate on the nuclear deal, he presented his case. He listed out the assurance that the left had sought, popularly referring to as Sitaram Yechury's red lines, and assured the Lok Sabha that the final agreement would adhere to these principles. He assured the parliament that India was not giving up on its strategic autonomy, but he pointed out in order to secure what was India's due, the government had to enter into negotiations that involve some give and take, which is what the negotiations are all about. He quoted Machiavelli's The Prince, a book I had gifted him on his birthday in September 2004 to say, it must be considered that there is nothing more difficult to carry out, nor more doubtful of success, nor more dangerous to handle than to initiate a new order of things. For the reformer has enemies in those who profit by the old order, and only lukewarm defenders in all those who would profit from the new order. This lukewarmness arises partly from the fear of their adversaries who have the laws in their favor, and partly from the incredulity of mankind who do not believe in anything new until they have the experience of it. Thus, it arises on every opportunity that on every opportunity for attacking the reformer, his opponents do so with the zeal of partisans. The others can defend him half-heartedly, so that between them he runs a great danger. Dr. Singh admitted that the negotiations he had authorized entailed taking some risk in the scope of making important gains, and reassured the House, I am aware of the risk, but for India's sake I am willing to take those risks. It was a rare act of courage and political grandstanding that won him applause in the parliament and from across the country. The media finally came to accept the PM knew what he was doing, and that was an important project that deserved support. A series of public opinion polls conducted by TV channels and news magazines showed overwhelming support for the PM, for the deal, and for the good Indo US relations. In the weeks to come, negotiations proceeded apace. In late 2006, there were two important changes of personnel in the Ministry of External Affairs. Shiv Shankar Menon, then India's High Commissioner to Pakistan, took charge as the Foreign Secretary, and a month later, Jay Shankar was appointed India's High Commissioner to Singapore. Shiv Shankar's appointment happened amidst much drama. Till the 11th hour, I thought Sham Sharan would get an extension. I got an inkling it was otherwise when, before lunch on 31st August 2006, Pulak Chatterjee walked up to my room and asked how much time it would take for me to make an official announcement public. I said 2 minutes. He was not convinced. I then explained to him that if I were to send a statement as an SMS to text to any news channel, it would appear as breaking news within a minute. He seemed satisfied and said he might have an important announcement to make once the PM signed the relevant file, and I should let him know in case I was going out for lunch. After lunch, Pulak walked in again and told me that the PM had cleared the appointment of Shiv Shankar Menon as Foreign Secretary. I sent a text message to the editors at three English news channels, namely Rajdeep Sardesai of CNN IBN, Barkha of the NDTV, and Navika Kumar of Times Now. The three channels flashed the news immediately. Minutes later, MEA spokesperson Navtej Sarna called to check if the news report was correct. I confirmed it. I did not know why the announcement was made in this manner. Some speculation that the secrecy was meant to prevent officers superseded by Menon going to court and securing a stay order on the grounds that due procedure had not been followed. Normally, such an announcement is made only after the members of the Appointments Committee of the Cabinet sign the file. In this case, it was made before the file was signed. Perhaps the PMO did not want a controversy before the announcement. However, the manner of Shiv Shankar's appointment did become the subject of controversy when an IFS officer complained that her seniority had been overlooked in appointing him and demanded an explanation from the government by appealing to the Central Administrative Tribunal. She also questioned the unprecedented manner and timing of the announcement of his appointment by the Prime Minister's office on August 31, 2006, well before its approval by the approval of the Appointments Committee of Cabinet on September 4, 2006. The Central Information Commission accepted the officer's plea that the government owed the officer an explanation in its decision, but ultimately dismissed the petition, taking the view that all of this was the PM's prerogative. Perhaps Dr. Singh's mindfulness of the left's concern over the India-US nuclear deal may have led him to give up the idea of giving an extension to Foreign Secretary Sham Saran, who was handling the negotiations, and overlooked the claims of over a dozen Foreign Service officials to appoint Shiv Shankar Menon. On account of Shiv Shankar's long-standing personal equations and family connections with left leaders, the left regarded him as a friend. These changes of personnel in the MEA coincided with the slowing down of the process of negotiation. Indeed, right through the first half of 2007, negotiations between Indian and US officials proceeded at a slow pace. The officials of the DAE, christened by the media as scientists and therefore somehow given a superior status than ordinary bureaucrats of other ministers played their own games. Once elections to the State Assembly in Uttar Pradesh were announced in early 2007, some DAE ministers began to deliberately drag their feet, assuming a victory for Mulayam Singh Yadav and his Samajwadi Party. At the time, critic of the nuclear deal would weaken Dr. Singh. They miscalculated in assuming that Mulayam's public criticism of the nuclear deal was as ideological as that of left rather than a bargaining chip with which he would eventually strike a deal with the government for whatever end. One senior DA scientist administrator had the audacity to suggest that Mulayam's victory would mean the end of the nuclear deal, if not of Dr. Singh himself. All these were pipe dreams of technocrats nervous about what the impending transformation of India's civil nuclear program would mean for their own turf. It took a long time for Narayan to get a grip of the DAE establishment. At one stage, Dr. Singh had to prod him to speed up the process by saying, MK, this agreement should be more important for you than me. I have already made my work with the economic reforms we launched in 1991. Even if I don't achieve anything as a prime minister, I would be still remembered for what I did as a finance minister. What about you? Who knows what you have done all your life as an intelligence officer? If you get this agreement done, you can publicly claim that you have achieved something. When I tried to expose some of these games of the DAE officials, a campaign was launched against me by the media, uh, by nuclear scientists who had in fact come to me more than once seeking an advisory role in the PMO. By June 2007, impediments had also arisen on the US side, and Dr. Singh had to raise the issue with President Bush at the G8 summit at Heiligendamm in Germany. Bush summoned his national security advisor and instructed him to bang heads together in Washington and get the deal done. Worried that on his side the PMO was not able to control the negotiations, Dr. Singh took the unusual step of redrafting Jaishankar and then posted in Singapore as High Commissioner into a negotiating process. Finally, on 3rd August 2007, the government was able to make public of the 123 agreement. After careful reading of the agreement, N. Ram, chief editor of The Hindu and a skeptic on the deal, wrote a full-page editorial comment under the headline, "A sound and honorable 123." He wrote enthusiastically. It is a sound and honorable agreement, and the assurances provided to Parliament by Prime Minister Manmohan Singh in 2006 may have been fulfilled virtually in their entirety, said the editorial. The editorial criticized the BJP for raising ill-informed objections. The Manmohan Singh government has won for India the keys to unshackle its nuclear program from the unfair restrictions it had been subjected to for the past 13 years. On reading this editorial, I called Ram and thanked him on Dr. Singh's behalf. He sounded ecstatic and was full of praise for the PM. Tell the Prime Minister he has made history. I suggested that he should tell that to him personally. Ram agreed to fly down the same day from Chennai. After checking with Dr. Singh, I invited Ram to have breakfast with the Prime Minister the next day. For more than an hour over breakfast, Ram waxed eloquent on the deal, calling it a great achievement for India and a great political coup for the PM. When Ram left, Dr. Singh sat back in his chair looking completely satisfied. He had crossed the Rubicon, he thought. Ram was a close friend of Prakash Karan and himself a long-standing member of the CPM. Dr. Singh took Ram's endorsement as a signal from the left that it would not attack the deal. Rather, rarely had I seen Dr. Singh as so pleased and so at peace, so content as he was that morning. An hour or so later, Ram called me at my office at South Block. Right after his breakfast meeting with the PM, he had gone off to meet Karan. Sanjaya, I have some bad news. The left will not support the 123 agreement. They will ask the government to put the negotiations on hold. This came as a shock. Ram agreed that it was so and said he too was surprised. He had spent some time explaining the benefits of the deal to Karat, but the later he said was not interested. He has taken a political decision, said Ram. It was not about the merits of the deal, but the politics. You will have to tell the PM that he should put the deal on hold. Karat will be making a statement asking the government not to operationalize the deal. I rushed to RCR to deliver the message to the PM. While driving down, I called Sitaram Yechury to seek an explanation. He confirmed Ram's account and said that this was Karat's decision and would have to be ratified by the Politburo. Yechury sounded displeased and helpless. It was he who had read out to Rajya Sabha the famous red lines to the government on what would be acceptable to the left. He agreed now that the 123 agreement had offered reassurance on every one of the issues raised by the left and the DAE. Neither Ram's friendship nor Shiv Shankar's equation, nor indeed Yechuri's best efforts could come in the way of Karat's decision. It was clear that Yechuri was not happy with Karat's decision. On reaching 7, RCR conveyed Ram's message and Yechuri's remarks to the PM. He was furious. He had been let down by the left. Before publicly responding to the left's rejection of the 123 agreement, Dr. Singh its leaders to invited its leaders to a briefing and a discussion a couple of days later. All the details of the agreement presented to them by officials of the DAE and the PMO. Shortly before they left the meeting, Dr. Left leaders addressed a press conference rejecting the agreement. As Dr. Singh watched Karat address the press on television, I was struck by the contemptuous manner in which the CPIM leader spoke. When he charged the government of giving up India's independent foreign policy and becoming an ally of an imperialistic power. It is the same independent foreign policy that they had opposed when they had asked Panditji and Indiraji, Dr. Singh said mockingly, as he watched Karat fume and fulminate. When the press conference ended, he became glum and angry. After several minutes of silence, he got up to go home for dinner, making one last comment. The left have always opposed the Congress on foreign policy when it suited them. They criticized Panditji, they criticized Indiraji, they attacked Narasimha Raoji. Whatever I did as a finance minister, they criticized. They criticized non-alignment when it smited them, supported it when it suited them. As long as I am the prime minister, I will not allow these communists to dictate our foreign policy. A couple of days later, Dr. Singh met Manini Chatterjee of the Telegraph, Kolkata, in his room in Parliament. She had taken charge of the Telegraph's Telegraph's Delhi bureau chief and wanted to meet the PM. It was a courtesy call, not an interview, but it turned into one. The Prime Minister, still angry, was in a talkative mood and was willing to be candid when replying to our questions on the left's demand. As his remarks became more and more interesting and newsy, Manini realized she had front page story. She sought the PM's permission to quote him and report his views. He looked at me. I told him that if he truly felt this way, he owed it to the nation to make his views known. This was an important issue on which his critics were freely offering their criticism. He should not remain silent, I said. Dr. Singh agreed to allow Manini to report what he had said. He only insisted that since she had not recorded his remarks on tape, she should clear the text of her report with me before its publication. Manini and I sat in the anteroom and shared our notes. She went to her office and typed out the story and emailed it to me. It was an accurate report and I gave her the green signal. Next morning on September 11, on Saturday 11 August, the Telegraph ran a headline, anguished PM to the left. If you want to withdraw, so be it. The report said, tired of left party's constant bark, the Prime Minister Manmohan Singh dared them to bite after their latest diatribe against the Indo-US nuclear deal. It quoted Dr. Singh as saying, I told them it's not possible to renegotiate the deal. It is an honorable deal. The cabinet has approved it. We cannot go back on it. I told them to do whatever they want to do. If they want to withdraw support, so be it. The news report sent shockwaves around Delhi. Narayan and Nair called me to find out if the report was accurate. They were not aware of the PM's meeting with Manini, which had taken place in Parliament House, and they themselves were in South Block. It is also possible that neither was aware of the PM's anger and anguish as I had been. They reported that the Congress party leadership was unhappy with the interview and might want the PM to issue a denial. Since the PM's statement was not taped, felt Narayan it would be possible for him to issue a denial. I was appalled by that line of argument but kept silent. It occurred to me that they, along with the Congress party functionaries, might have decided to get the PM to issue a denial and put the blame on me for what Manini had written. I realized that the Prime Minister might come under pressure from his party but was not sure what he would do. I returned to my room, read through my own notes of what exactly the PM said and waited for the summons. Several journalists called to say that the Congress party was planning to deny the story, saying Dr. Singh never issued such ultimatum. To the left, one senior journalist called to tell me that Ahmed Patel had said to him, how can Dr. Saib issue an ultimatum to the left? He did not bring them into alliance with us, so he cannot ask them to go. I waited the whole day for a call. Yeah, I waited for the whole day for a call from Dr. Singh. Would he uh, would would he regret having said what he had said? Would he disclaim his remarks and ask me to issue a denial? The phone never rang through the weekend, but there was no official denial either. Meanwhile, Delhi's political circles buzzed with speculation. On Tuesday, 14 August, a day before Independence Day, Subbo told me to my surprise that Dr. Singh had decided to stop all references to the 123 agreement from his address to the nation from the ramparts of the Red Fort. The approved draft had a positive, powerful paragraph taking credit for an achievement for which he had been hailed widely. It was dropped at the 11th hour. Standing on the ramparts, the PM could have proudly proclaimed that he had done the nation proud. He had secured for India a new status as nuclear power. I am tired. He had secured India a new status as a nuclear power, but while he spoke at length about everything else the government had done during the year, this one great achievement that year found no mention at all. As they walked down to the stairs from the ramparts of the Red Fort, leaving the function, ministers, officials, and diplomats were puzzled by this omission. Those who knew that I was Dr. Singh's speechwriter asked me why there was no reference of the 123 agreement of the PM address in the PM's address. I had no answer. While the diplomats had done India proud negotiating a historic agreement, India's politicians let the country down. The hypocrisy of the left was exposed by the somersault Ram had to perform on the editorial pages of the Hindu after proclaiming the 123 agreement sound and honorable. He followed up with an editorial a few days later towing Karat's line and advising the government to put the nuclear deal on hold. And Yechuri, who had privately agreed that the PM had done what he had promised to, publicly criticized him. The left's opposition evolved from being purely ideological into becoming a political ploy by Karat aimed at marginalizing all the pro-PM elements within his own party. Surjit, Jyoti Basu, Buddhadev and Yechuri were the moderates. Having upstaged Surjit, Karat used the issue of opposition to the nuclear deal as a way of consolidating his own position within the CPI. The CPI was uncomfortable with the Karat's rigid opposition. CPI leaders D. Raja and S. Sudhakar Reddy knew me well, especially the latter, whom I had known from my student days in Hyderabad. He was a disciple of Mohit Singh. He came home to see me and let me know that the CPI was not happy with Karat's rigid anti-deal line but felt helpless. The CPI, he admitted, did not want to destabilize the government but was unable to get Karat to alter his line. The BJP too was a divided house. Moderate leaders like Vajpayee and even younger ones like Arun Jaitley were not resolutely opposed to the deal. It was clear that just as Karat has used his opposition to the deal as a way of rallying his own party cadres behind him, LK Advani too chose to adopt a rigid stance to force the party to abandon the Vajpayee line and accept him as the new leader. Divisions within the BJP came into the fore once Dr. Singh's briefing of the party leaders on the 123 agreement. Advani was not in Delhi, but the meeting at 7 ASIA was attended by Vajpayee, Jaswant Singh, Yashwant Sinha, Arun Shourie, and Brajesh Mishra. Sinha and Shourie asked questions, asked the scientists, diplomats, and PMOs officials many searching questions, expressing their skepticism on what had been secured. Jaswant Singh, on the other hand, complimented the officers with his usual gravitas, saying, "Gentlemen, you have done the nation proud." Vajpayee remained silent. At one point, Brajesh Mishra walked round the table and handed over a piece of paper to Vajpayee. He looked at the paper, folded it, and put it in his pocket. Dr. Singh turned to Vajpayee and asked him if he wished to say something. Vajpayee smiled and remained silent. Yashwant Sinha, Shourie, and Brajesh looked eagerly at Vajpayee, obviously hoping he would say something, but he did not oblige. The meeting ended, everyone stood up and one by one walked out of the room through a door opening into a corridor. Vajpayee took his own time to stand up. Then Dr. Singh walked his predecessor out through an adjacent door with a shorter road. close to where his car was parked. I was a step behind Dr. Singh. Standing at the door of his car, Vajpayee gave Dr. Singh a warm smile and the two shook hands. Vajpayee nodded his head and smiled, as if to suggest the PM had done a good job and he was satisfied. I have only completed what you began, Dr. Singh said, breaking the silence. Vajpayee smiled, nodded his head, and got into the car and drove away. What followed over the next few weeks was a period of political suspense. It was not clear what would happen next, even though the government kept up the pretense of carrying on negotiations with the left. Every now and then, rumors would circulate that Dr. Singh was contemplating resignation. When a serious political journalist with a major national daily asked a senior Congress leader known to be close to Sonia how true these rumors were, the leader retorted, "Let him resign. We have so many others ready to become the PM. Any one of them can do an equally good job." On 12 October 2007, both Sonia Gandhi and Dr. Singh spoke at the Hindustan Times Summit. In response to a pre-approved question that Veer Sangvi had posed to Sonia, she said that the survival of the government took precedence over the nuclear deal, and while the Congress would continue to try and win over the left, it would do nothing to force the issue and risk a break with the left. Dr. Singh watched her remarks live on television at 7 RCR. As soon as her session was over, the PM's carcade left for Taj Palace Hotel, where Dr. Singh was scheduled as a second speaker. In a pointed question, the newspaper's editorial director Veer Sangvi asked him, "You made a statement to a newspaper which was a bit out of sync with your persona and started all controversy. Do you think you overstepped a bit?" Dr. Singh responded with uncharacteristic firmness, "I don't think I overstepped. I was responding to a public statement issued by four left parties, and I don't think I overstepped. I am quite conscious of my responsibilities and what I should say and what I should not say." However, fully aware of what Sonia had said before him, the PM parried question on the nuclear deal, saying that his government was not a one-issue government and one has to live with certain disappointments. If the deal does not come through, then that's not the end of life. He returned home deeply disappointed. As I took leave of him, he asked me, "Who are the wise men around whom I can turn to for advice?" I said that I knew of only two wise men. One was my father, who happened to be in Delhi at that day, and the other was my guru, K. Subramaniam. He to asked to see them both and met each of them separately. Both advised him to stand firm. He had done what he had done with a full cabinet approval. Backing off now under pressure from the communists would show India in a bad light. If the party was not prepared to back him, he should quit. "She has let me down," he said to both in separate meetings he had with them, in a voice tinged with more sadness than anger. The next day, Dr. Singh flew on stage flew on a state visit to Nigeria. As I settled down in my hotel room, my phone rang. Subbu was on the line. "PM wants to see you. Can you come down immediately to his room?" I sensed a rare urgency in his tone and left my room as I was, without footwear, in shirt sleeves and trousers. When I entered the PM's suite, I found Dr. Singh seated in the middle with Mrs. Kaur on the side and Subbu on the other. Subbu got up and offered me a chair. Dr. Singh looked grim. "What did you tell the US ambassador?" I was surprised at the question by the time. What did I tell the US ambassador? I could not recall talking to him. I had asked him what the context was. "I am told you made some remark to him on the nuclear deal. What did you say?" It came back to me in a flash, just as I was packing to leave my office room in South Block the day before he left for Algeria. I got a call from Ted Oasis, a diplomat in the US Embassy. He called to say that he had a copy of the PM's speech at the Hindustan Times Summit, but the copy did not contain the remarks that the PM had made on the fate of the nuclear deal. So where did he say that he was quoted in the press as saying? I told the diplomat that those were extempore remarks made by the PM in response to a question posed by Veer Sangvi, and he could find the transcript in the PMO's website. He then went on to say that the US Ambassador David Mulford was keen on reading the PM's statement. To understand what exactly he had said, could I explain to him the PM's remark? I was in a hurry to wind up for the day and was not sure what else I could offer in the way of explanation. Whatever the PM had said was out there. I had nothing more to add. The diplomat persisted, asking me of what I thought the PM meant When he said I offered an explanation, the PM was saying K Sara Sara. As I recall this, Dr. Singh said exactly what is the meaning of K Sara Sara. I couldn't help laughing loudly. Oh, I said, Dr. Singh, you know, someone reported to you and you might have spoken some secret code. I continued to laugh. Maybe those eavesdropping on my conversation could not decode the phrase for the PM. Mrs. Kaur smiled. She knew what the words meant. K Sara Sara, I told Dr. Singh, was Spanish for whatever will be, will be. He had not seen the Hitchcock movie, The Man Who Knew Too Much. Mrs. Kaur had seen it and she said, yes, I remember the movie and that song. Doris Day sang it, I pointed out. Yes, agreed Mrs. Kaur. It was Doris Day. As I hummed the tune, Subbo was amused, Dr. Singh was not. He heard me with a somber expression. What else could I say? I asked him. It's not the US ambassador, the entire media, and many in the government. It's not just the US ambassador, the entire media, and many in the government have been asking the same question. What exactly did the PM mean when he said he was not a one issue government and that one has to live with certain disappointments? If the deal does not come through, then that's not the end of life. Was the deal dead? I did not know. I explained to him, so I felt the best answer to give the US diplomat was K. Sarasara. Finally, Dr. Singh smiled. He said that he got a call from Pranab Mukherjee, who had told him that Mulford had called on him and sought an explanation of both Sonia and the PM statement at the Hindustan Times Summit and wanted to know if the government had decided to shelve the negotiations and the deal. Pranab tried to offer an explanation. Mulford then told him that when his colleagues asked the PMO for explanation, he was told, "K Sara, what did you think the PMO guy meant?" Mulford asked Pranab. Several days later, back in Delhi, I found myself seated at the banquet table at Rashtrapati Bhavan at a dinner in honor of a visiting band playing a visiting president of Switzerland. The president's banquets usually have live band playing music. The tunes that were played in the evening were listed on a card and placed in front of every guest with a menu card. As I glanced through the card, my eyes caught the name of the second number which was yet to be played. It was Doris Day's K Sarasara. I circled the name of the tune in the card and passed it on to the table to Dr. Singh. He looked at the card and then he looked at me. I pointed him in the direction of the man and made a gesture with my forefinger as if it was the conductor's line. Dr. Singh smiled. For the first time in his life, he was hearing the lovely tune from the fantastic Hitchcock movie. It seemed that evening that with so many other issues, he would take the fatalistic view that whatever will be on the signature issue initiative. At times, I would be frustrated by this fatalism, even more so by some of his aides justifying it in the name of political survival. At other times, I would step back and wonder if there was something to be learned by this approach. On the nuclear deal, at least, he proved to be more a strategist than a fatalist. In the weeks that follow, he began to reveal his cards that he had held so close to his chest. Slowly but surely, he began to make his moves before using the threat of resignation to get Sonia on his side. With this, we come to the end of a very long chapter. I hope that my tiredness and sleep deprivation did not show through. But what do we have to unpack in this chapter is the work that Dr. Manmohan Singh put in to get the nuclear deal through, his personal equation with President Bush, who had a lot of respect for him, who used to call him Sir at the beginning, and reached a stage after 2 years where he would pat him on his back, or rather, hold his shoulder and walk with him like a buddy. Obviously, there were two sections in India who were not happy with all this friendship and association with US. One was certain sections of the minority Muslim community, and second was the left, which did not want India to mix too much with the capitalist country, as they called it. Um, uh, but Dr. Singh went through, and the deal involved a lot of negotiations. The negotiations in terms of how many nuclear establishments would be civilian, how many would be how many would be for strategic purposes. India had 22 such establishments, so it was a question of whether it was 18 and 4 or 14 and 8. So and India kept pushing back, and the left obviously was not very supportive of it. There were also conditions on on not supporting other new countries who had aspirations of going nuclear, on standing firm, which is a bit hypocritical, on countries who would be acquiring nuclear weapons. In India's case, it was Iran, which did what India did of acquiring nuclear weapons, of rather acquiring nuclear technology. So these are some of the challenges that he faced. It has been a very long chapter, but one or two key points that come out of it were his perplexity on whether he should stick to his guns against opposition from the left, against opposition from his own party. Natwar Singh, with whom he did not have a great relationship to start with, supported him throughout. He continued to override over Pranab Mukherjee, who he did not expect to support him much, but Pranab Mukherjee also, in certain cases, stood by him. Sonia Gandhi did not disturb him in any of his dealings, though Congress party workers were not completely appreciative of the initiatives that he had taken. So Sanjay felt that if it had been Indira Gandhi or Rajiv Gandhi doing what Dr. Manmohan Singh had done, then all the politicians would have lined up in Delhi ready to welcome him back from his US trip. But that was not the case with Manmohan Singh. He had to fight a very lonely battle, first in US to get the deal through, and then back in India to get the people to support him. He tried using senior journalists like Enram, who was known to be a communist supporter, and he shared all the details of the 123 agreement with him. Dr. Enram was completely enthusiastic about it, and he kind of supported him on him. He had already written a very good editorial piece on it. But later, when Enram had a meeting with Prakash Karat, the head of the CPI, and Prakash Karat kind of told him that he's not going to back this, and they would pull back their support. And Enram obviously dutifully conveyed this to Sanjaya and to Manmohan Singh. Manmohan Singh was very upset. The Congress party felt that he should back off from the 123 agreement, and in the name of political survival, make the compromise. There was a press conference subsequently of the Hindustan Summit, where Hindustan Times Summit, where against an extempore question by the director editor Veer Sanghvi, he answered that uh, that sometimes in life you don't have much of an option. You have to make compromises, and if the deal doesn't go through, it doesn't go through. They've tried their best, and this statement was picked up by the US, and they were worried whether the deal would not go through, and after he made the statement, the PM was scheduled for a trip to Nigeria. So he goes to Nigeria, and Sanjay obviously is accompanying him. When they reached Nigeria, there was a call on Sanjay's room, where the PM was called him, beckoned him to his room, and asked him if he had made any particular statement to a high-ranking official in US, to which Sanjaya flash ran through Sanjay's mind, and he remembered a particular incident where he was asked about what would happen and what was the implication of the statements made, because the statements made by Dr. Singh were to a question which was extempore, and therefore it was not recorded in recorded as a document, and was not accessible to the public. So he was asked to explain the PM statement, and for which he said that it was case sara saraka, whatever will happen will happen, and that was possibly the right way of portraying Dr. Manmohan's statement, where he said that disappointments are part of political life. You'll have to take with what you have and move on. Uh, Dr. Manmohan Singh initially was a little concerned, and then when he understood the meaning and heard about the song Kesara Sara from the Hitchcock movie from his own wife, he kind of relaxed a bit. Uh, of course, the issue of whether he would hold his gun and uh, dare the left to leave support is still not over, and the Congress party made statement that they would possibly back down, but he took an advice from two people. He asked Sanjaya who were the wise men here. Sanjaya gave the name of his father and he gave the name of K. Subramaniam. He asked both of them. He met them separately. He was a little upset and he said that Sonia had let me down, and he asked them what they suggested, and both of them suggested that he should stick his guns and dare left to uh, withdraw support if it needed be, but not let the country down. And that's how the chapter ends. So it's been a very long video. I hope that you have uh, journeyed with me through this chapter. Thank you very much, and we will see each other in the next chapter. Thank you. Bye.